Have you ever looked at the person you love most and realized they are a complete stranger? That was my life for 8 years. The husband I adored, the father of my children, had built a paradise for us, but that paradise was bought with blood and deceit. This is my true story, about how I had to shatter that castle of happiness with my own hands to save my children, about the escape from the man who was both my everything and my life's worst nightmare. If you are listening from anywhere in the world, please leave a comment and subscribe, because there are truths that need to be spread, even if they might shake your beliefs. There are stories, no matter how painful, that must be told. Look, for you to understand the whole story, I have to take you with me back to 1985, when I was just 25 years old and lived in a beautiful little town called Traverse City in Michigan. It was a very quiet place where we all knew each other, where you could walk down the cobblestone streets without any fear, and where families helped each other as if we were all relatives. I came from a very humble, but very hard-working family. My dad, may he rest in peace, was named Walter Davis and worked in a car parts factory. My mom, Patricia Clark, did laundry for other people to help with the household expenses. There were 5 of us siblings. Me, the second oldest, my sisters Jessica Davis and Linda Davis, and my brothers Michael Davis and David Davis. We all lived squeezed into a small 2-bedroom house, but we were happy because there was a lot of love. My dad always told us, "Girls, study, work hard, because education is the only thing no one can take from you." And I listened to him. I finished high school, which in those days wasn't so common for women from poor families, and I even took a secretarial course in the state capitol. I remember my mom sold her chickens to pay for that course, and I promised her that one day I would pay her back. When I returned to Traverse City, I got a job at the city hall as a secretary. It was a very respected job in the town, and I was very proud to be able to help my family with my income. I earned $1,200 a month, which in those days was good money for a single girl. The atmosphere in our town was very traditional. We women married young, had children soon, and our main job was supposed to be taking care of the house and family, but I had other dreams. I wanted to see the world. I wanted to study more. I wanted to be independent. My friends told me I was crazy, that a 5-year-old woman was already on the shelf, that I needed to find a husband before it was too late. And then he arrived, Thomas Thompson. He was 32 years old. He was tall, dark-haired, with beautiful brown eyes and a smile that could melt your heart. He always dressed very elegantly, with ironed shirts and dress pants, and drove a blue Ford Taurus that was the envy of everyone in town. He said he was a businessman, that he had businesses in different cities, and that's why he traveled so much. The first time I saw him was on a Tuesday afternoon in September 1985. I was leaving City Hall when he approached me and asked for directions to the main church. He had a different accent. He wasn't from Michigan. He later told me he was from Illinois, from Chicago. He explained that he had come to Traverse City on business, but had fallen in love with the town and was thinking of staying for a while. That same week, I ran into him in the main square, then at the market, then at the pharmacy, always very polite, very gentlemanly, always with a smile and a kind word. My sister Jessica told me, "Sarah, that man is courting you. It's obvious he likes you, but I thought it was just a coincidence." Listening to this, I'm sure many of you, especially the younger women, are thinking, "Oh, Sarah, how could you be so naive?" And you know what? Looking back, I ask myself the same thing. But when a small-town girl who has never seen much of the world is suddenly swept off her feet by a man like that, well, you tend to believe in fairy tales, even when they seem too good to be true. Until one Friday afternoon, when I was buying vegetables to make dinner, he approached me with a bouquet of yellow flowers, which are my favorites, although I had never told him that. "Miss Sarah," he said with that soft voice he had, "I would like to invite you for a coffee this Sunday after church, if you'll allow me." I turned red as a tomato because in those days those things were done very formally, and also because it had been a long time since I had felt so nervous around a man. I said yes, but that I had to ask my dad for permission first because that's how things were done in my house. When I got home with the flowers, my mom immediately knew what had happened. "And who's the handsome man?" she asked me with that mischievous smile she always had. I told her all about Thomas, and she told me that he seemed like a serious, hard-working man, that he could be a good opportunity for me. My dad was more suspicious, as dads usually are with their daughters. And what does this man do for a living? What kind of business does he have? Why would a man from Chicago come all the way here to find a wife? But my mom convinced him to at least meet him before judging him. That Sunday after church, we went for coffee at the only formal restaurant in town, which was called The Homestead. Thomas behaved like a perfect gentleman. He asked me about my family, my work, my dreams. He told me he had an import-export business, that he bought products in the United States and sold them in Mexico, and that he also had some properties he rented out. He explained that while his business often took him to larger port cities, he had chosen Traverse City as his home base because it had the charm and tranquility he was looking for to start a family. "Sarah," he said, taking my hand across the table, "I'm not a young man. I'm already 32, and I've been looking for the right woman to share my life with. I think you could be that woman." I was speechless. It was the first time someone had spoken to me like that, with such seriousness, with such intention. The boys in town were always very shy, very indirect. But Thomas knew exactly what he wanted and wasn't afraid to say it. For the next 6 months, Thomas courted me like in a romantic movie. Every week, he brought me different flowers. He took me to dinner at restaurants in nearby cities, gave me expensive perfumes and pretty little jewels. My family liked him a lot because he always arrived with gifts for everyone: chocolates for my sisters, cigars for my dad, a silk shawl for my mom. He was also very generous with money. When my brother Michael needed money to fix his motorcycle, Thomas lent it to him without even asking for it back. When my dad's washing machine broke down, Thomas showed up the next day with a new one and didn't even accept our payment. I was completely in love. It's easy to see how Sarah fell so hard. For a small-town girl with big dreams, Thomas was the entire world delivered to her doorstep. But as we often learn, when something seems too good to be true, it's because a difficult truth is hiding just beneath the surface. Stay with us, as Sarah is about to get the perfect life she always wanted, or so she thinks. Thomas made me feel special, important, as if I were the most beautiful woman in the world. He told me I was intelligent, that I had potential, that with him I could see other countries, learn other languages, have a better life than I had ever dreamed of. In March 1986, Thomas asked me to marry him. It was in the main square, a Sunday after church, in front of half the town. He got down on one knee with a diamond ring that seemed to cost more than my entire year's salary, and asked me if I wanted to be his wife. I said yes between tears of happiness, and the whole town applauded. We got married in July 1986 inches the Street Francis Church. It was a very big and elegant wedding, because Thomas insisted it be perfect. He hired a live band from Detroit. He had a wedding dress made from an expensive store in New York City, and the reception was at the finest hotel in the region. My whole family was very impressed, and I felt like a princess. After the honeymoon in Hawaii, which was the first time in my life I'd been on a plane, we went to live in a beautiful house that Thomas had bought on the outskirts of town. It was a large house with 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a modern kitchen, and a huge garden with fruit trees. For a girl who had grown up in a small 2-room house, that was like a palace. The first years of marriage were, honestly, very beautiful. Thomas traveled a lot for his work. Sometimes he was away for 2 or 3 weeks, but he always came back with gifts and stories from the places he had visited. He told me about luxurious hotels, exotic foods, cities that I only knew from maps. When he was at home, he was the perfect husband. He helped me with the chores, took me for walks, listened to me when I talked about my work at the city hall. He was also very romantic, always saying nice things to me, hugging me a lot, making me feel loved and valued. In 1988, our first daughter, Sophia, was born. Thomas was crazy with happiness. He said she was the most beautiful baby in the world, that she looked just like me. He hired a girl to help me with the house and the baby, so I wouldn't get too tired. "My queen," he would say, "you just focus on being a mom and a wife. I'll take care of everything else." The life I had built with Thomas seemed like something out of a fairy tale. We lived in that beautiful house with its garden full of purple lilacs and apple trees that perfumed the whole yard. Sophia was a very calm, cheerful baby, and I had gotten used to my new routine as a housewife. I had left my job at the city hall when I got married because Thomas insisted that his wife didn't need to work. "Sarah, my love," he would say, hugging me in the mornings. "I work so you can dedicate yourself to the important things, taking care of our home, raising our children, being happy. That's what the wives of successful men do." And honestly, I liked that life. After so many years of seeing my mom work so hard, of seeing the financial worries in my house, it was very nice not to have to worry about money. It was very nice indeed. But there was a price for that comfort that I didn't see at the time: my independence. When you give up your own source of income, you're also giving up a piece of your own voice and your own power. It's an expensive lesson that I hope none of you ever have to learn. Thomas gave me a very generous amount each week for household expenses: $500 for food, $300 for medicine and baby things, $200 for my personal expenses, and he always told me, "If you need more, just tell me." He also paid all the bills, the gas for the Ford Taurus he had given me so I could get around with the baby, and even the tuition for a Spanish class at the local college, telling me it would be useful for our future travels. But as time went by, I started to notice some things that made me curious. Thomas received many phone calls at odd hours. Sometimes the phone would ring at 2 inches the morning. He would answer in a very low voice, speaking in English or a language I didn't understand, and then he would become very quiet and thoughtful. When I asked who had called, he always gave me the same answer: "Business, my love. You know I have clients in different countries, and the time differences sometimes mean they call me at very odd hours." I believed him because, honestly, I didn't understand much about international business. It also struck me that Thomas never took me to meet his family. According to him, his parents had died when he was very young, and he had no siblings. "It's just you, Sophia, and me," he would say when I asked, because he never talked about relatives. "My real family is you guys now." In 1990, our second child, Ethan Jr., was born. My husband was so excited that he started to cry when the doctor told him it was a boy. "My heir," he said, holding him, "the one who will carry on the Thompson name." That night we stayed up very late, planning our children's future, the education we were going to pay for, the trips we would take as a family. To celebrate the birth of our son, Thomas gave me a beautiful gold bracelet with little diamonds embedded in it. "For the most wonderful mother in the world," he said, putting it on my wrist. "I promise you will always have the best, that you will never lack for anything, that our children will grow up surrounded by love and comfort." And he kept his promises. With each passing year, our financial situation seemed to improve. Thomas traded the Taurus for a new Suburban, remodeled the house, and put a pool in the backyard. The children had the nicest clothes, the most expensive toys, and I had a wardrobe that was the envy of all the ladies in town. But there were also other things that worried me. Thomas had placed several very heavy safes in the basement of the house and always kept them locked. When I asked him what he kept in there, he told me they were important business documents, contracts, property deeds, very valuable things that couldn't be lost. "My love," he explained with great patience, "in international business, you have to be very careful with documentation. One lost paper can mean the loss of thousands of dollars. That's why I prefer to keep everything here, in our house, where I know it's safe." He also forbade me from entering his study. It was a room at the back of the house where he would lock himself in every morning to make his work calls. It had a special lock, one that required a code to open, and he had explained that he kept very confidential documents in there that not even I could see. "It's not that I don't trust you, Sarah," he would say when I asked why all the secrecy. "It's to protect you. In my business, there is very sensitive information, and the less you know, the safer you and the children will be. It's better this way. Believe me." I accepted his explanations because I loved him, because I trusted him completely, and because the truth is that our life was very comfortable, and I had no reason to complain. It's so easy to judge me now, isn't it? But try to put yourself in my shoes for a moment. I had everything I had ever dreamed of, and asking too many questions felt like trying to pop the beautiful bubble we were living in. Sometimes, my dears, we choose not to see the truth, because the lie is just so much more comfortable. Thomas was a loving husband, a dedicated father, and he gave us a better life than I had ever dreamed of. But trust is a funny thing. It's like a beautiful glass vase. Once a tiny crack appears, you can't unsee it. And for me, those little secrets, the late-night calls, the forbidden study, the safes in the basement were tiny cracks. During the day, I would push the feeling down. I'd watch Thomas play with the children in the garden, his laughter echoing in the sunshine, and I'd tell myself I was being foolish, that I was letting my small-town upbringing make me suspicious of a successful man. But at night, when the house was quiet and he was away on a trip, the questions would creep back in. I started living two lives: the happy, contented wife on the outside, and a woman with a growing knot of anxiety in her stomach on the inside. I chose to ignore the cracks, because admitting they were there meant admitting that my entire beautiful life might be a fragile illusion. In 1992, when Sophia was 4 and Ethan Jr. was 2, my husband proposed something that excited me very much: moving to a bigger city. "I've been thinking, my love," he said one night while we were having dinner, "that maybe it would be good for us to live in a place with better opportunities for the children. Grand Rapids, for example, or maybe Chicago, which is my hometown." I really liked the idea, because I had always dreamed of seeing big cities, of my children having access to better schools, better hospitals, more opportunities. "Do you think we could?" I asked excitedly. "Of course," he replied. "My business is doing very well. I can work from anywhere, and I think it's time you lived the life you deserve." We started making plans for the move. Thomas traveled to Grand Rapids several times to look for a house, and in the end, he found a beautiful one in a very exclusive neighborhood called East Grand Rapids. It was a huge 2-story house with 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a living room, dining room, modern kitchen, maid's quarters, and a garden that looked like a park. "This is for you, my queen," he said when he showed me the photos. "So you can have the space you deserve, so the children can play without limits, so we can be truly happy." I was so excited I started to cry with joy. The move was quite an adventure. Thomas hired a professional company that packed all our things, and we traveled in the Suburban with the children and suitcases of clothes. I remember Sophia was very excited, asking every 5 minutes when we were going to get to the new house, and Ethan Jr. fell asleep in my arms after the first hour of the trip. When we arrived in Grand Rapids, I was astonished. The house was even more beautiful than it looked in the photos. It had luxury finishes, marble floors, new and elegant furniture, and a garden with a fountain in the center that sounded like soft music. "Welcome to your new home, my love," Thomas said, carrying me like newlyweds across the threshold. "We're going to be very happy here, I promise." And I believed him with all my heart. The first few months in Grand Rapids were wonderful. We enrolled Sophia in a very good kindergarten, where besides English, she was taught Spanish and computer skills. I joined a neighborhood wives group where we organized charity events and baking classes. I also started taking driving lessons because in such a big city, I needed to be more independent in getting around. Thomas seemed happier than ever. His trips had become more frequent. Sometimes he was away for a whole week, but he always came back eager to be home, to play with the children, to tell me about his adventures. "Business is going great, my love," he would say when I asked how his trips went. "I have new, very important contracts, clients that will generate a lot of money for years. Soon we'll be able to buy that beach house in Miami that you like so much, and maybe even take you to see Europe." I was living in a kind of happiness bubble. I had a beautiful house, healthy and intelligent children, a husband who loved me and gave me everything I needed. My parents came to visit us often and were always impressed by how well we lived. "Daughter," my mom would say, "God blessed you with a good man. Thomas adores you. You can see it in the way he looks at you, in how he cares for you and the children. Take good care of him, because men like that are hard to find." And I thought she was right. I considered myself the luckiest woman in the world. But there were little things that unsettled me, although I tried to ignore them. Thomas had once again put safes in the basement of the new house, and again he had forbidden me to go near them. He also had a study with a coded lock, just like in Traverse City, and he received the same mysterious calls at odd hours. He had also started to be more careful with his clothes. I used to wash and iron all his clothes, But now he told me that some shirts and pants had to be taken to a special dry cleaner because they were made of very delicate fabrics that could be damaged by normal washing. I also noticed that he had started using Spanish words that I didn't know when he talked on the phone. I already understood basic Spanish from the classes I had taken, but Thomas used technical terms I had never heard, and he spoke with an accent that didn't seem the same as when we practiced together. I once asked him where he had learned to speak Spanish so well, and he told me he had studied at a language school in Chicago before we got married. "It's essential for international business, my love," he explained. "If you don't speak Spanish perfectly, you can't compete in the global market." But what struck me the most was that Thomas never introduced me to his partners or clients. In Traverse City, when someone had a business, it was normal for the wife to know the people her husband worked with. But Thomas always met with his contacts in hotels or restaurants, never at home, and he never invited me to accompany him. "My love," he would say, when I suggested I'd like to meet the people he worked with. In international business, things are different. They are very formal, very serious meetings, where only work is discussed. It would be boring for you, and besides, it might make my clients uncomfortable, as they are used to strictly professional meetings. I accepted his explanations because I trusted him, but a part of me was curious. What were these people like? What were these important meetings like? Why so much secrecy? In 1994, 2 years after we moved to Grand Rapids, the first crack appeared in my perfect world. It was a Tuesday afternoon. Thomas was on a trip. A sharp knock on the door made me jump. Through the peephole, I saw 2 men in plain clothes. My heart began a slow, heavy drumbeat against my ribs. They showed me their badges. "Police." "Mrs. Thompson," one of them said, his voice polite but firm. "We are investigating some irregularities in import documents. Your husband's name has come up." The words hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Irregularities. Police. The 2 words didn't belong in my life, in this beautiful house. My hands grew cold. I don't understand," I stammered, the lie tasting like ash in my mouth because a part of me, a tiny, terrified part, was starting to understand everything. I told them Thomas was away, that I knew nothing of his business. "He keeps me separate from it." "To protect me," I heard myself say, the irony of the words twisting in my stomach. "Your husband travels frequently?" the other police officer asked. "Do you know which cities he goes to? Does he have contact with people from other countries?" I answered truthfully that yes, he traveled a lot, that he went to different cities depending on his clients, and that he sometimes spoke with people from the United States, but that I didn't know the details because he kept me away from the business to protect me. The police officers exchanged glances that I didn't like. "Ma'am," the tall man said, "if you notice anything strange, anything that seems unusual in your husband's behavior, it's important that you call us. Here's my card, and please don't mention this visit to him until we have finished our investigation." When they left, I was very uneasy. And just like that, the first real crack appears in Sarah's perfect world. It's one thing to have a suspicion, but it's another entirely to have the law show up at your door. The question now isn't just what Thomas is hiding, but what Sarah will do when she finally learns the truth. Uneasy? That word doesn't even begin to cover it. It felt like a cold stone had just dropped into the pit of my stomach. For the first time, it wasn't just a strange phone call or a locked door. It was the law, and I was standing right in the middle of it, having to choose which side to believe, not knowing that both sides were telling me a part of a terrifying truth. What irregularities? Why had Thomas's name appeared in police records? And why did they ask me not to tell him anything? For days, I mulled over the matter, trying to decide whether or not to tell Thomas about the police visit. In the end, I decided not to say anything because the police had asked me to keep quiet, and also because I was afraid that Thomas would get angry with me for talking to them. But I kept the officer's card in a safe place, just in case I needed it. When Thomas returned from his trip, I noticed he was more nervous than usual. He checked the mail very carefully, made more phone calls than usual, and sometimes stayed up very late working in his study. When I asked if everything was okay, he said yes, he just had some minor problems with some clients, nothing important. But I was beginning to feel that something was not right. The police visit had put me on alert, and now I noticed things I had overlooked before. Thomas had changed some routines. He had started to be more careful with his papers, and sometimes I would catch him looking at me in a very strange way, as if he were studying me. One night, while he was asleep, the phone rang. Thomas answered half asleep, and I could hear part of the conversation because he was speaking louder than usual. He was speaking in English, and although I didn't understand everything, I could catch some words that scared me. Problem, police, dangerous, move quickly. The next day, Thomas announced that he had to take a very long trip, maybe a month, to several countries in South America. It's a very big opportunity, my love, he explained, but it will require me to be away longer than usual. Do you think you can manage alone with the children? I said yes, not to worry, but inside I felt very uneasy. Something was changing. Something was happening, and I had the feeling that Thomas was hiding something very important from me. I had no idea that I was about to discover the most terrible truth of my life. Thomas's trip lasted longer than planned. He had said he would be gone for a month, but we had already gone 6 weeks without any news from him. At first, he called me every 3 or 4 days, but then the calls became more spaced out, and in the last 2 weeks, I had heard absolutely nothing from him. I was very worried, but also a little annoyed. I understood that his business was important, but we were important too, his children and his wife. Sophia, who was already 6, asked every day when her dad was coming back. Ethan Jr., 4 years old, had started throwing tantrums and having nightmares, as if he sensed that something was not right. To keep myself busy and not think so much about Thomas's absence, I decided to do a deep clean of the whole house. I wanted everything to be perfect when he returned, just as he liked it. I started with the bedrooms, then the living rooms, the kitchen, the bathrooms, and finally I got to the basement. There were many boxes stored there. Some we had brought from Traverse City, and others that Thomas had put there after we arrived in Grand Rapids. There were also the famous safes that he kept locked and that I had never been able to open. But there were other normal cardboard boxes that only contained books, old clothes, and family mementos. While organizing those boxes, I found one I didn't remember seeing before. It was a medium-sized brown cardboard box that was half hidden behind other larger ones. When I moved it to arrange it better, I heard something rustling inside, like loose papers. Curiosity got the better of me. The box wasn't locked. It just had regular tape, so I thought it wouldn't be a problem if I opened it to see what it contained. Maybe it was old documents I could organize better or photos we had lost. When I opened the box, the first thing I saw were many manila envelopes of different sizes, each marked with dates and numbers I didn't understand. I opened one at random, and inside were photographs, but they weren't normal photographs. They were photographs of people I didn't know, taken from a distance, as if someone had been spying on them. There were photos of men in expensive suits getting in and out of luxury cars, photos of people talking on the phone in public places, photos of people entering and leaving buildings. All the photographs had dates written on the back, and some had notes in a handwriting I didn't recognize. I opened another envelope and found more photographs, but these were even stranger. They were photos of stacks of cash, of open boxes full of money, of suitcases with contents I couldn't identify. There were also papers with numbers, addresses, names of people, and what appeared to be codes. My heart started to beat very fast. What was all this? Why did Thomas have photographs of unknown people? Why did he have photos of so much money? What did all those numbers and codes mean? I continued to look through the box with trembling hands. At the bottom, I found several passports. I opened them one by one and got the biggest surprise of my life. All the passports had Thomas's photograph, but with different names. In one, he appeared as James Wilson, in another as Robert Anderson, in another as William Taylor. How was it possible that my husband had passports with different names? I knew it was illegal to have false documents, but I didn't understand why Thomas would have them or what he would use them for. With my legs shaking, I continued to examine the contents of the box. There were papers written in English that seemed to be contracts or agreements, but with terms I didn't understand. There were addresses in different countries, bank account numbers, and what seemed to be lists of products with very high prices. But what left me completely frozen was a folder at the bottom of the box. When I opened it, I found newspaper clippings, both in Spanish and English, with headlines that made my hair stand on end. Cocaine shipment seized at Port of Miami, drug trafficking ring busted at the border, police search for leaders of international cartel. Some of the clippings had red circles around certain words, and others had notes in the margins. There were also photos cut from newspapers of men who had been arrested, and some of those faces looked familiar from the photographs I had seen in the other envelopes. I couldn't breathe. In the cold silence of the basement, it wasn't just a marriage that was ending. It was Sarah's entire reality. Every memory, every loving gesture was now tainted by this horrifying truth. She has just uncovered a secret that could get her and her children killed, and the man responsible is on his way home at any moment. Keep listening to see what happens next. The cold concrete of the basement floor seemed to leach the warmth from my body. I wasn't just looking at papers and photos. I was looking at the wreckage of my life. Every memory, every kiss, every promise from the last 8 years felt like a lie. The man I loved, the father of my children, he didn't exist. In his place was a stranger, a criminal whose face was on these fake passports. The beautiful house, Sophia's lessons, the diamond bracelet on my wrist. What was it all built on? The question screamed in my mind, so loud I was afraid the neighbors would hear. It wasn't just about crime. It was a betrayal so deep it felt like my own soul was being torn apart. I wasn't just married to a man with a secret, I was living inside the secret. We were all living inside it. And for the first time, I felt the cold, terrifying walls of that secret closing in on me and my children. With trembling hands, I continued to look through the papers. There were maps with marked routes that went from Colombia and Peru, through several Central American countries, to Mexico and the United States. There were lists of cities, ports, airports, with specific dates and times. I also found copies of documents that appeared to be cargo, manifests for ships and planes, but with products that had code names: refined sugar, special flour, ground coffee, but with quantities and prices that made no sense for normal products. In another envelope, I found photographs of me and the children, but they weren't normal family photos. They were photographs taken without my knowledge, from a distance, as if someone had been watching us. There were photos of Sophia and Ethan Jr. playing in the garden, photos of me shopping at the supermarket, photos of the whole family leaving the house. Why would someone be watching us? Why were there photographs of us in the same box with all those documents about drug trafficking? Suddenly, I heard the sound of the electric gate opening. Thomas was back. A terrible panic seized me. If he found out I had discovered all this information, what would he do to me? What would he do to the children and me? With desperate movements, I tried to put everything back in the box, in the same order I had found it, but my hands were shaking so much that I dropped several papers. I picked them up as best as I could, closed the box, and put it exactly where I had found it. I ran to the basement bathroom to wash my hands and face because I was sweating a lot, and I didn't want Thomas to notice that something was wrong. Then I went up to the kitchen. I tried to control my breathing and started preparing dinner to seem normal. When Thomas entered the house, I was chopping vegetables to make a salad, but the knife was trembling so much in my hands that I almost cut myself. He greeted me with a kiss, as always, but I stiffened when he touched me. "How are my loves?" he asked in the same affectionate voice as always. "Did you miss me a lot?" The children ran to hug him, excited to see him after so many weeks, and I tried to smile and act normal. "Everything okay, my love?" he asked when he noticed I was very quiet. "You look a little pale. Are you feeling unwell?" I told him I was just tired, that it had been very difficult being alone with the children for so long, and that I was very happy he was back. During dinner, I tried to behave as usual, asking him about his trip, listening to his stories, but every word he said sounded different to me now. Now, when he talked about the cities he had visited, I wondered if he had really been there on legal business or if he had been coordinating something related to drugs. When he talked about the hotels where he had stayed, I thought of the photographs of unknown men I had seen in the box. When he mentioned his partners, I imagined dangerous drug traffickers instead of respectable businessmen. The hardest part was the physical pretense. Every evening, he would come home and kiss me, and I would have to force myself not to flinch. His touch, which once felt like a safe harbor, now felt like a brand. I had to smile when he told a joke, nod when he talked about his day, and lie next to him in bed while my mind was screaming. I felt like a spy in my own home, an actress in a horrifying play. I would look at him across the dinner table, this man who was a complete stranger to me, and feel a wave of nausea. He had built our family on a mountain of secrets and danger, and here I was, serving him dinner as if none of it was real. That week was the longest of my life. Each hour a tightrope walk between discovery and survival. That night, when we went to bed, Thomas behaved as always. He hugged me, told me he had missed me very much, that he had thought of me every day. But when he touched me, I felt as if he were a stranger, as if the man I had been married to for 8 years were a completely different person. I couldn't sleep all night. I lay awake, listening to Thomas's breathing, wondering who this man sleeping next to me really was. Can you imagine that feeling? Lying next to someone whose warmth has been familiar to you for years, but suddenly their every breath sounds like a threat. The man I married had vanished, and in his place was a stranger whose secrets could get us all killed. That night, the silence in our bedroom was the loudest, most terrifying sound I had ever heard. Was he a dangerous criminal? Had we been living on drug money? Were the children and I in danger? I also thought about the police officer's card I had hidden in my jewelry box. Should I call him? Should I tell him what I had found? But what if I was wrong? What if there was an innocent explanation for everything I had seen? Over the next few days, I tried to act normal, but it was impossible. Thomas noticed that something had changed in me. I was no longer affectionate like before. I no longer asked about his work. I no longer got excited when he talked about future projects. "Sarah," he said one afternoon while the children were playing in the garden, "I feel like something has changed between us. Did I do something wrong? Are you mad at me for being away for so long?" I didn't know what to say. A part of me wanted to confront him directly, to ask him about the fake passports, the photographs, the newspaper clippings, but another part of me was afraid, very afraid of what might happen if he realized I had discovered his secret. "No, I'm not mad at you," I lied. "I'm just a little stressed. The kids have been very restless." He hugged me and said he understood, that maybe I needed to rest, that we could hire someone to help me more with the house and the children. But that night, when he thought I was asleep, Thomas got up and went down to the basement. I heard his footsteps on the stairs, and then a noise like boxes being moved. My heart raced. Had he noticed that someone had been looking through his things? Had he realized that I had found the box? The next day, Thomas announced that he had to travel again, but this time only for a week. "It's a very important matter," he said, "but it will be the last long trip for a while. After this, we'll be able to spend more time together." When he left, I waited 2 days before going back down to the basement. I had to know if Thomas had moved or hidden the box, but when I got to the place where I had found it, it was gone. I searched the entire basement, but there was no trace of it, nor of any of the safes that had always been there. Thomas had cleaned everything out. He had erased any evidence of what I had discovered, but it was too late because I already knew the truth. My husband was not an honest businessman. He was a criminal, possibly a drug trafficker, and we had been living on dirty money for years. After Thomas took all the boxes from the basement, I realized I had to make a very difficult decision. On one hand, there were my children, who adored their father and had no idea he could be a criminal. On the other hand, there was my conscience, which wouldn't let me live in peace knowing that we were possibly living on drug money. But what scared me the most was thinking about the dangers we could be facing. If Thomas was involved in drug trafficking, what would happen if his enemies decided to attack his family? What would happen if the police arrested all of us? What if one day armed men showed up at our house looking for Thomas? The photographs of my children and me that I had seen in that box kept me up at night. Someone had been watching us. Someone knew where we lived, where we went, what our routines were. Were they Thomas's enemies, or was it the police who had us under investigation? During the 2 weeks that Thomas was away on that last trip, I lived in a constant state of nervousness. Every strange noise made me jump. When someone knocked on the door, I would peek through the window before opening, in case it was the police again, or worse, dangerous people looking for my husband. I also started noticing things I had overlooked before. There were cars that seemed to follow me when I went out with the children. There were men who would stand on the corner of our street for hours, pretending to be waiting for the bus, but never getting on one. One afternoon, as I was returning from the supermarket with Sophia and Ethan Jr., I saw that the same gray car had been behind us the entire way. When we got home and I quickly went inside, the car remained parked across the street for over an hour. That night, I called my mom, who still lived in Traverse City, and told her I wanted to visit her with the children. I didn't explain the real reasons. I just told her I felt very lonely and needed to be with family for a few days. "Of course, sweetheart," my mom said. "This is always your home, and we're always happy when you come with the grandkids. Can't Thomas come with you?" I explained that he was on a business trip and I preferred not to wait for him because I didn't know when he would be back. I packed clothes for a week, put the kids in the Suburban, and we left for Traverse City. The whole way, I kept checking the rearview mirror to see if anyone was following us, but I didn't notice anything strange. Being at my parents' house calmed me down a bit. It was the same humble little house where I had grown up, where everything was simple but honest, where there were no secrets or hidden dangers. My parents were so happy to see us, and my siblings doted on Sophia and Ethan Jr. "It's clear life has treated you well, daughter," my dad said one afternoon while we were having coffee on the patio. "You have a beautiful family, a very good financial situation, a husband who adores you. God has blessed you greatly." If only he knew, I thought. If only he knew that everything we had possibly came from criminal activities. Hearing those words from my father, my heart just broke into 100 pieces. He saw a blessing, and I was living a curse. It was one of the loneliest moments, having to smile and nod while my soul was screaming the truth. I had to protect him from the truth, just as I was about to protect my children. If he knew the dangers we could be in, he wouldn't say that God had blessed me. On the 4th day of being in Traverse City, Thomas called me. He had returned from his trip and was very worried because he hadn't found us at home. "Why didn't you tell me you were going to Traverse City?" he asked in a voice that sounded annoyed. I got really scared when I arrived, and the house was empty. I explained that it was a last-minute decision, that I had felt very lonely and wanted to be with my family for a few days. "We'll be back tomorrow," I promised. I just wanted the kids to spend some time with their grandparents. But Thomas insisted that we return immediately. "My love," he said, "I have very important news for you. My business has changed, and we need to talk urgently about our family's future. It's better if you come back today." Something in his tone of voice scared me. He didn't sound like the usual affectionate and patient Thomas. He sounded anxious, worried, almost desperate. "What kind of news?" I asked. "Did something bad happen?" "Not over the phone," he said. "You know I don't like to talk about business over the phone. But it's important, Sarah, very important. I need you to come back now." With a racing heart, I explained to my parents that I had to return to Grand Rapids immediately. My mom noticed I was nervous. "Is everything okay, daughter?" she asked. "You've seemed very worried since you arrived." For a moment, I was about to tell her everything. To tell her that I had discovered that Thomas was possibly a criminal, that I was scared, that I didn't know what to do. But I didn't want to worry her. And besides, I wasn't sure she would understand or be able to help me. "Everything's fine, Mom," I lied. "It's just some work stuff with Thomas, nothing important." But inside, I knew something very serious was happening. The trip back to Grand Rapids was torture. The children were tired and throwing tantrums, but I was so nervous that I didn't have the patience to comfort them properly. Every mile closer to the house was another step towards a confrontation that I knew had to come. When we arrived, Thomas was waiting for us at the door. He hugged the children very affectionately, but when he hugged me, I felt like he was studying me, as if trying to read my face to know what I was thinking. "How is my beautiful family?" he asked with his usual smile, but his eyes had an expression I had never seen before. It was a mixture of worry, anxiety, and something that looked to me like suspicion. After we had dinner and put the children to bed, Thomas asked me to sit with him in the living room because he had something very important to tell me. My heart was beating so fast I was sure he could hear it. "My love," he began, taking my hands. "My business has been going through a very complicated situation lately. There have been some problems with the authorities, some misunderstandings about documents, and my lawyer has advised me to take some precautions. There it was, the confirmation of what I already knew. Thomas did have problems with the authorities. The police officers who had come to the house had not been mistaken. What kind of problems? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Is it serious? Thomas sighed and remained silent for a very long moment. Sarah, he finally said, I'm going to tell you something that might scare you, but I need you to trust me. My business is not exactly as I had explained it to you before. I waited without saying anything because I knew the worst was coming. I've been working with people who move special products that the American authorities consider illegal, but that are handled differently in other countries. It's nothing violent, nothing that directly harms people, but technically it's illegal according to American laws. Drugs? I asked directly. Are you talking about drugs, Thomas? He squeezed my hands tighter. Sarah, please understand me. I did it for us. To give you the life you deserved. To give our children the opportunities I never had. The money I earned from legal businesses would never have been enough for everything we've achieved. The shock of his confession left me breathless. For 8 years, I had been married to a drug trafficker. For 8 years, I had been living a lie. For 8 years, my children and I had been in danger without knowing it. Thomas, I said with a trembling voice, do you realize what you're telling me? Do you realize the danger you've put us all in? That's why I'm being honest with you now, he replied, because things have gotten complicated and we need to make important decisions very quickly. My lawyer says it's very likely that the American authorities will issue an arrest warrant for me in the coming weeks. My world came crashing down. They're going to arrest you? And what will happen to us? What will happen to the children? That's the important part, Thomas said, and his voice changed completely. It no longer sounded pleading or regretful. It sounded cold, calculating, as if he were talking about business. We're going to have to leave the United States. This is the moment the mask truly comes off. It's no longer a request or a discussion. It's a command. The man Sarah thought was her protector has just revealed himself as her jailer, and her beautiful home has become a gilded cage. She now has a choice to make, and it's one that will change everything. All of us. Immediately. Leave the United States? I asked incredulously. Thomas, what are you talking about? This is our country. Our family is here. Our children are in school here. We can't just disappear as if nothing happened. But Thomas was no longer asking me. He was informing me of a decision he had already made. Sarah, my love, you have no choice. If they arrest me, they will investigate the whole family. They will freeze our bank accounts. They will take the house. They will interrogate you as if you were an accomplice. Do you want our children to grow up with the stigma of being the children of a drug trafficker? His words hit me like slaps. It was true. If Thomas was arrested, we would also suffer the consequences. The children would be pointed at in school. I would be seen as the criminal's wife. Our social life would be over. But it was more than just the social consequences. I saw a change in Thomas that night, a shift behind his eyes. The warmth was gone, replaced by a cold, calculating resolve. When he spoke of fleeing, of new identities, he wasn't asking for my opinion. He was giving me orders. He was no longer my partner. He was my captor, and this beautiful house had suddenly become a gilded cage. He looked at me, not with the love I had known, but with the gaze of a man assessing an asset, a piece of his escape plan. It was then I knew that the danger wasn't just from the police or his enemies. The most immediate danger was now sleeping in the bed next to me. I have contacts in Colombia, Thomas continued. People who can help me get new documents for the whole family. We can start a new life there with different names, with a different story. The children are young. They will adapt quickly. New documents, different names. Thomas, that's illegal. That's forging identities. That would make us criminals too. We are already criminals, Sarah, he said with a coldness that chilled my blood. From the moment you started spending the money I brought in, from the moment you started living in this house, paid for with that money, you are already an accomplice. The law will not distinguish between the innocent wife and the wife who knew everything. That night, I couldn't sleep. Thomas had fallen asleep as if nothing had happened. But I stayed awake all night, thinking about what he had told me. Was it true that I was already an accomplice? Was it true that the law would punish me, even though I hadn't known anything? The next day, when Thomas left early to take care of some urgent business, I made a decision. I looked in my jewelry box for the card the police officer had given me almost 2 years earlier and dialed the number. Inspector Mitchell. A male voice answered after the second ring. Inspector, this is Sarah Thompson. You came to my house some time ago to ask about my husband Thomas. I need to speak with you urgently. There was a silence on the other end of the line. Mrs. Thompson, are you in immediate danger? I don't know, I answered honestly, but I have important information about my husband, and I need to know what my legal options are. The inspector arranged to meet me that same afternoon at a coffee shop in downtown Grand Rapids. He told me to go alone, not to tell Thomas anything, and to be very careful not to be followed. When I arrived at the coffee shop, Inspector Mitchell was waiting for me at a table in the back. He was a man of about 50, serious but not intimidating, who spoke to me with great patience and understanding. Mrs. Thompson, he said after I told him everything I had discovered, you are not guilty of your husband's crimes, but you are right to be concerned about your legal situation. When we arrest Thomas, which will be very soon, you will be questioned exhaustively. Will they arrest me too? I asked, my heart in my throat. Not necessarily, he replied. But they will investigate your involvement in the management of Thomas's assets. They will review your bank accounts, your properties, your expenses. If they can prove that you knew where the money came from, then yes, you could face charges as an accomplice. But I didn't know, I insisted. I never knew anything until a week ago when I found that box in my basement. I believe you, ma'am, the inspector said, but you will have to prove it before a judge. And in the meantime, you and your children will go through a very difficult, very public, very painful process. What do you advise me to do? I asked, because I no longer knew who to trust. The inspector thought for a long time before answering. Ma'am, officially I cannot advise you to do anything illegal, but unofficially, as a family man myself, I understand that you want to protect your children. What does that mean? I insisted. It means that if a person wanted to disappear before the arrest warrants arrived, and if that person were very careful, very intelligent, and had a good plan, they might be able to avoid a lot of legal trouble, especially if that person cooperated with the authorities by providing valuable information about their spouse's criminal activities. There was my answer. The inspector was implying that if I helped him arrest Thomas and disappeared before they arrested me, I might have a chance to save my children from this whole mess. And there it is not an easy path, but a possible one. This is no longer about being a victim. This is Sarah deciding to become a player in a very dangerous game. She's about to walk back into that house and lie to the face of a dangerous man, all while planning her own secret escape. Let's see how she pulls it off. What kind of information do you need? I asked. Everything you know about Thomas's contacts, his travel routes, his communication methods, his bank accounts, his properties, any detail that can help us dismantle his operational network. That night, when Thomas returned home, I had already made my decision, but I wasn't going to tell him. On the contrary, I was going to play along. I was going to pretend that I agreed with his plan to flee to Colombia while secretly preparing my own escape. Thomas, I said as we were having dinner, I've been thinking about what you told me yesterday, and I think you're right. If there's really no other option, then we have to think about what's best for the children. He looked relieved. Really, my love? Are you willing to come with me? Yes, I lied. But I need time to prepare myself mentally, to find a way to explain it to the children, to say goodbye to my family without raising suspicion. Of course, my love. I understand perfectly, he said, taking my hand. We can wait a couple of weeks so you have time to arrange everything. In the meantime, I'll finish coordinating everything in Colombia. Perfect. 2 weeks was exactly the time I needed to put my plan into motion. Over the next few days, I began to observe Thomas's routines very carefully, what time he got up, where he went, who he talked to on the phone, what he did in his study, when he left the house, and when he returned. I also started to find and photograph any document or paper he left lying around, receipts, business cards, phone numbers written on napkins, anything that could be useful to Inspector Mitchell. I discovered that Thomas had a very fixed routine. He got up at 6 inches the morning, locked himself in his study from 6:30 to 8 to make calls, had breakfast with me and the children, left the house at 9, came back for lunch at 2 inches the afternoon, stayed at home until 5, and then went out again until 8 or 9 at night. But the most important thing I discovered was that Thomas had a safe hidden behind a painting in his study. One afternoon, while he was showering, I managed to get into the study and photograph the combination he had written on a small piece of paper taped under the desk. It was incredible that someone so careful could be so careless with something so important. I also realized that Thomas had started moving money. During that week, he made several trips to the bank, and once I followed him discreetly and saw that he didn't go to our usual bank, but to a different one in another part of the city. When he returned, he was carrying several bags of documents and went straight into his study. Inspector Mitchell and I continued to meet twice a week at different coffee shops. I would give him all the information I gathered, and he would explain how the arrest process worked and how I could protect my children. "Ma'am," he said in one of our meetings, "the information you've given me is very valuable. With this, we can not only arrest Thomas but also dismantle a significant part of his operational network. That will weigh heavily in your favor when your case is evaluated." "What exactly will happen when they arrest him?" I asked. "We will arrive at your house with a search warrant very early in the morning, probably on a Tuesday or Wednesday of next week. We will arrest Thomas, confiscate all his documents and assets, and interrogate all family members present." "And if I'm not present?" I asked. The inspector looked me in the eyes. "If you are not present, you will have to voluntarily present yourself within the next 24 hours, or an arrest warrant will be issued for you as well." "And if I never show up?" I insisted. "Then you will be considered a fugitive from justice, and they will search for you until they find you. But if that happens long after we arrest Thomas, and if you are living quietly somewhere else without being involved in criminal activities, it is possible that the authorities will not put much effort into looking for you." That night, I started working on the specific details of my escape plan. It had to be something that wouldn't arouse Thomas's suspicions, something that would allow me to leave the country with my children before he was arrested, and something that would give me enough time to establish myself in a safe place. The first thing I did was open a secret bank account. I went to a bank in another city using my maiden name, Sarah Davis, and opened an account with the few personal savings I had from before I was married. I also discreetly sold some jewelry that Thomas had given me and deposited that money into this secret account. The second thing was to get my children's and my documents. I went to the Vital Records office and got certified copies of our birth certificates, telling them I needed them for school procedures. I also went to the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services office and got information on how to obtain tourist visas. The third and most risky thing was to get into Thomas's safe. I waited until one night when he had gone out and was later than usual. I went into his study, moved the painting, opened the safe with the combination I had photographed, and found exactly what I expected: stacks of bills in dollars and pesos, several passports with different names, and documents that appeared to be property deeds in different countries. I took an amount of money that wasn't too noticeable, equivalent to about $6,000, and photographed all the documents I could. I also took one of the passports that had Thomas's photo, but with the name James Wilson, because I thought it might be useful as evidence. The fourth thing was to plan exactly how and when I was going to leave. I decided the best thing was to pretend I was going to visit my parents in Traverse City again, but instead of going there, I would go directly to the border with Canada. I had a cousin, Jennifer, who lived in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario, and had always told me that her house was open to us. I called Jennifer and explained that I was going through a very severe marital crisis, that I needed a place to stay with my children for a few weeks while I decided what to do. Jennifer, who had always been very understanding, told me we could come whenever we wanted. "Cousin," she said, "you will be safe and welcome here for as long as you need. And if you want to look for a job here in So Sweet, Marie, I can help you find something." The fifth thing was to get the Canadian visas. This was the most complicated because I had to do it without Thomas finding out. I told him I wanted to take the children to Disney World for their birthdays, that I had seen a very cheap tour package, but that I needed to get the visas first. Thomas didn't object. On the contrary, he thought it was a good idea. "Of course, my love," he said. "Get the visas, and after we sort out this business problem, we can take the kids to see Disney World." He gave me the money for the paperwork and even accompanied me to the consulate on the day of the appointments. We got the visas without any problem. Thomas, Sophia, and Ethan Jr. appeared in our passports as a normal, upper-middle-class family, with no criminal records, who wanted to tour Canada. The last and most emotionally difficult thing was to prepare myself to leave my life behind. I started discreetly packing the most important things: family photographs, some mementos from my parents, the children's favorite clothes, their most beloved toys, important documents. I put everything into 2 large suitcases that I hid in the utility room and told the children I was organizing clothes to donate what we no longer used. I also began to mentally say goodbye to everything that had been my life for 8 years. The beautiful house, the financial comfort, the friends from the club, the social life, the feeling of security. I knew that all of that was going to end forever, but I also knew that it was the only way to protect my children. Inspector Mitchell confirmed that Thomas's arrest would be on Tuesday of the following week, very early in the morning. "Ma'am," he said, "if you are going to do what I think you are going to do, you have to leave on Monday afternoon at the latest, and you have to be very far away when we arrive on Tuesday morning." "Will they think I knew they were coming?" I asked. "Will they be suspicious?" "Honestly, yes," he replied. "But if you are already settled in another place, living a normal life without doing anything illegal, they will have to prove there was a conspiracy, and that is very difficult to prove." That night, Sunday, when Thomas was already asleep, I stayed up very late writing him a letter. I wasn't going to give it to him personally, but I wanted him to know why I had left. I wanted him to understand that I had to protect our children, and I wanted him to know that, despite everything that had happened, a part of me would always remember him fondly for the good times we had lived. "Thomas," I wrote, "when you read this letter, we will already be very far away. I'm not doing this out of resentment or revenge. I'm doing it because I am a mother before I am a wife, and my first responsibility is our children. They deserve to grow up in peace, without fear, without bearing the consequences of decisions they didn't make. I hope that one day you can understand and forgive my decision." On Monday morning, Thomas got up as usual, locked himself in his study, had breakfast with us, and then told me he had to go out to arrange the final details for our trip to Colombia. "I'll be back at 5, as always, my love," he said, giving me a farewell kiss. "And tomorrow we'll start packing the final suitcases." I smiled and told him I would be waiting with dinner ready, but I knew it was the last time I would see him. As soon as Thomas left the house, I put my final plan into motion. I had exactly 8 hours to execute my escape before Thomas returned home at 5 inches the afternoon. 8 hours to forever change the destiny of my children and myself. 8 hours to go from being the wife of a drug trafficker to being a free woman, even if I was a fugitive. The first thing I did was call the children's school. "This is Mrs. Playton Thompson," I told the principal. "I need to pick up Sophia and Ethan Jr. because we have a family emergency. My mother-in-law is very ill, and we have to travel immediately." "Of course, Mrs. Thompson," the principal replied. "Do you need me to prepare their homework so they don't fall behind?" "Yes, please," I said. "They might be out for 2 weeks." When I went to pick up the children, they were excited because they thought it was an unexpected adventure. "Are we going to see Grandma and Grandpa again?" Sophia asked me. "Can we bring toys?" Ethan Jr. asked. "Yes, we're going to see Grandma and Grandpa," I lied, because I still didn't know how to explain the truth to them. "And yes, you can bring your favorite toys, but only the ones that fit in your little backpacks." When we got home, I sat them down in the living room and explained that we were going on a very special, very long trip to see new places and new people. "Is Dad coming with us?" Ethan Jr. asked. "No, sweetie," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Dad has to stay and work, but we'll be talking to him on the phone every day." Sophia, who was already 8 and very smart, looked at me suspiciously. "Mommy, why are you crying?" she asked. "I'm not crying, sweetie," I lied, wiping away my tears. "I just have allergies from the dust I kicked up while packing." I executed the next steps like a machine. I got the suitcases I had hidden in the utility room. I added the extra clothes I had selected. I added medicines, documents, and the money I had taken from Thomas's safe. I also packed some family photos, especially of my parents and siblings, because I knew it would be a long time before I could see them again. And I carefully saved Thomas's fake passport and the photos of the documents from his safe. Then I went to the garage and checked the Suburban. It had enough gas to get to So Sweet Marie, and I had confirmed the route the night before. It was about an 8-hour drive, so if we left at 11 inches the morning, we would arrive around 7 inches the evening. Before leaving, I did something I knew was very risky, but very necessary. I went to Thomas's study one last time. I opened his safe and took more money. This time I didn't care if he noticed or not, because by the time he got back, we would already be in another country. I took another $10,000, bringing the total I had for our escape to about $16,000 in bills of different denominations. It was a lot of money, but it was money I considered belonged to me after 8 years of marriage, and besides, it was money I would desperately need to establish myself in Canada. I also left the letter I had written for Thomas on his desk, along with my wedding ring and the diamond bracelet he had given me when Ethan Jr. was born. At 11:15 inches the morning, we got into the Suburban. Sophia and Ethan Jr. were excited in the back seat, singing songs and playing, without imagining that they were leaving behind forever the only life they had ever known. I drove very cautiously for the first 2 hours, constantly checking the mirrors to make sure no one was following us. I didn't see anything suspicious, but my heart was beating so fast it hurt my chest. When we stopped at a gas station in Indiana to refuel and for the kids to use the restroom, I took the opportunity to call my cousin Jennifer from a payphone. "Jennifer, it's Sarah," I said. "We left, and we should arrive around 7 tonight." "Perfect, cousin," she replied. "I have everything ready to welcome you. Everything okay over there?" "Everything's fine," I lied. "See you in a few hours." For the rest of the trip, the children fell asleep, and I was able to drive in silence, thinking about everything that had happened and everything that was to come. Driving on that dark highway, with my 2 precious children sleeping in the back, was the loneliest and yet the most powerful I have ever felt. Every mile I drove away from that old life was a mile closer to an unknown, terrifying future. But for the first time, I was the one at the steering wheel, and I knew deep in my soul that I was driving us towards safety, even if I had to build that safety with my own 2 hands. For the first time in weeks, I felt in control of my destiny. I was no longer the victim of Thomas's decisions. I was no longer a wife living in ignorance. I was a woman who had made a very difficult decision to protect her children. Driving into the unknown, every mile puts her old life further in the rearview mirror. This is the loneliest, bravest moment for any mother sacrificing everything familiar for a chance at safety. She's heading for a new country with nothing but her kids and a bag of cash. But will the new life she's racing towards be the safe harbor she's hoping for? We arrived at So Sweet Marie just as dusk was settling. As soon as I saw Jennifer standing on her porch, a wave of relief so powerful washed over me that my knees almost buckled. She didn't ask questions. She just wrapped her arms around me and whispered, "You're safe now. You and the kids are safe here." She had a warm dinner waiting, and she treated the children with such normalcy and joy that their anxieties from the long trip melted away. Later, after they were tucked into bed, she made me a cup of tea. She didn't press for details. She just sat with me in the quiet kitchen and said, "Sarah, I don't know what you've run from, and you don't have to tell me until you're ready. But I want you to know this isn't just a stopover. This is a safe harbor. Whatever you need, for as long as you need it, you have it here." I looked at her, my eyes welling with tears, and could only manage to whisper, "It's very complicated, Jen, but I promise I'll explain everything in a few days, when my head is clearer." In that moment, her simple, unquestioning kindness was a lifeline in the darkest water I had ever known. That night, for the first time in months, I slept deeply. I knew I was safe, that my children were safe, and that I had made the right decision. The next day, Tuesday, around 10 inches the morning, Jennifer's phone rang. It was a long-distance call from the United States. "Sarah," Jennifer said with a worried look, "it's for you." A man's voice. "He says it's very urgent." I took the phone with trembling hands, knowing exactly who it was. "Sarah?" It was Inspector Mitchell's voice. "Are you okay?" "Yes," I replied, "I'm fine. It's over." "Yes, it's over. We arrested Thomas this morning at 6. He didn't resist, but when he saw you weren't there, he got very agitated. He asked several times where you and the children were." "Did you find evidence?" I asked. "More than we expected," the inspector replied. His house was practically an operations center. We found documents, money, weapons, drugs, communication equipment. He's going to be in prison for many, many years. And us? What will happen to me and my children? Officially, there is a warrant for your arrest to be questioned as a witness. But unofficially, the information you provided was so valuable that the prosecutor is willing to close the case as far as you're concerned, as long as you don't return to the United States in the next 5 years. 5 years? I asked, surprised. That's enough time for the case to be completely closed and for them to forget about you, the inspector explained. After that, if you want to return to the United States, you'll be able to do so without legal problems. 5 years. 5 years without seeing my parents, without seeing my siblings, without returning to my country. But 5 years was better than 20 years in prison, and it was definitely better than putting my children in danger. "Inspector," I asked before hanging up, "how is Thomas? Did he say anything about us?" "He's very affected," he replied honestly. "He says you were the only good thing in his life, that everything he did was to give you a better life. But he also understood why you left. He asked me to tell you, if I spoke with you, that he respects your decision and hopes you'll be happy." After hanging up the phone, I sat on the patio of Jennifer's house and cried for an hour. I cried for Thomas, for the man I thought he was, and who never really existed. I cried for the life we had and that had ended forever. I cried for my children, who would grow up without their father, and I cried for myself, for the naive woman I had been, and who had had to die for this stronger woman to be born. That afternoon, I explained to Sophia and Ethan Jr. that we were going to live in Canada for a long time, that Dad had had very serious problems with his work, and that it was better for everyone that we were far away for a few years. Sophia cried a lot and asked if we would ever see Dad again. "I don't know, sweetie," I answered honestly. "Maybe one day, when it's safe for everyone." Ethan Jr., who was younger, didn't fully understand what was happening, but he was content when I promised we would have video calls with his grandparents every week. In the following days, I began to establish our new life. The first thing was to find a job. Jennifer got me an interview at an accounting firm where she knew the manager, and although I was nervous about my American accent and lack of local experience, my secretarial skills were very useful. They gave me a job as an administrative assistant with a salary that wasn't very high, but was enough to support us. I also enrolled the children in public schools and was surprised at how quickly they adapted to the language and the Canadian culture. The second thing was to find our own place to live. After a month at Jennifer's house, I found a small but comfortable apartment in a housing complex with many American families. The children made friends quickly, and I began to feel part of a community. The third thing was to legally change our names. I consulted with an immigration lawyer. I explained that we were fleeing a domestic violence situation, which was technically true, although not in the traditional way, and he helped us start the process to obtain permanent residency under refugee protection. I changed my name from Sarah Thompson to Sarah Davis, returning to my maiden name. The children changed from Sophia and Ethan Jr. Thompson to Sophia and Eddie Davis. Ethan adapted very well to his new name, Eddie, but Sophia missed her original name. There was one night, about 2 months after we arrived, that I almost broke. The children were asleep, the small apartment was cold, and the reality of our situation crashed down on me. I sat on the kitchen floor with a stack of bills I didn't know how I would pay, my savings dwindling faster than I could have imagined. I was no longer Mrs. Thompson in her grand house. I was Sarah Davis, a fugitive, a single mother in a foreign country with a past that could destroy us. For a moment, I buried my face in my hands and sobbed, a raw, silent cry of pure terror. I questioned everything. Had I been selfish? Had I destroyed my children's lives? This is the reality of starting over that the fairy tales leave out. The moment of doubt, when the adrenaline is gone and the cold, hard reality sets in. For a moment, the fear is bigger than the hope. It is in these moments of near despair that a person's true strength is forged. Let's find out where Sarah finds hers. But then I heard little Eddie cough in his sleep from the other room. I crept in to check on him and Sophia, their faces so peaceful in the moonlight. And in that instant, a fierce protective fire ignited in my soul. The fear didn't vanish, but it was overshadowed by a powerful resolve. I wasn't a victim. I was their mother. And for them, I would not just survive. I would build a world for us, brick by honest brick. During the first year, I received several calls from Inspector Mitchell, keeping me informed about Thomas's case. He had been sentenced to 25 years in prison for drug trafficking, money laundering, and document forgery. He also informed me that they had completely dismantled his operational network, arresting more than 20 people in the United States and Colombia. "Ma'am," the inspector told me in one of our last conversations, "the information you provided was key to one of the most significant blows against drug trafficking in recent years. You did the right thing." After the second year, the calls became less frequent. The case was closed. Thomas was in prison, and we had built a new, stable life in Canada. We were no longer fugitives. We were legal residents who had escaped a dangerous situation. But I knew this wasn't the end of our story. It was just the end of our previous life and the beginning of something completely new. The years passed faster than I expected. Sophia and Eddie grew up as Canadian children, speaking perfect English, making friends of all nationalities, completely adapting to their new culture. Sometimes it hurt to see how easy it had been for them to forget their life in the United States, but I was also glad to know that they didn't carry any trauma or painful memories. My job at the accounting firm went very well. After 3 years, I was promoted to supervisor, and after 5 years, they made me an account manager. My English improved a lot. I took night classes in computing and administration and discovered I had business skills I never knew I had. With Thomas in prison and no possibility of receiving money from him, I learned to be completely financially independent. It was very difficult at first because I was used to a life of luxury, but it was also very liberating to know that every dollar I earned was honest, that everything I bought was with my own effort. I also began to gradually establish contact with my family in the United States. It was very painful at first because my parents didn't understand why I couldn't come back to visit them, why I couldn't explain exactly what had happened with Thomas. I told them we had had very serious marital problems, that he had deceived me with illegal businesses, and that it was better for the children to grow up in Canada. My mom cried during every phone call. "Daughter," she would say, "I don't understand why you can't come, even for a few days. Your grandchildren are growing up without knowing their grandparents, without knowing their American roots. That was the hardest thing to bear." But I knew I couldn't risk it. Even though Inspector Mitchell had told me that after 5 years I could return without legal problems, I was afraid that something would go wrong, that there was some document they hadn't found, some enemy of Thomas who wanted to take revenge on his family. During the 3rd year, I received a very unexpected letter. It came from the prison where Thomas was, and it was a letter written by him, addressed to my dearest Sarah. The letter said, "I hope you are well and that the children are growing up healthy and happy. I have had a lot of time to think about everything that happened, and I want you to know that I completely understand why you made the decision to leave. If I had been in your place, with 2 small children, I probably would have done the same. I'm not writing to ask for your forgiveness, because I know there is no forgiveness for what I did. I'm writing to tell you that I am proud of the strong woman you have become, of the brave mother you were to protect our children. I always knew you were special, but I never imagined you were so intelligent and so determined." At the end, Thomas informed me that he had waived all his parental rights so that I could make any legal decisions about the children without needing his consent. He also told me that he had put a bank account in Switzerland in my name, with money he had managed to hide from the authorities. "It's clean money," he wrote. "Money that I separated from my illegal activities precisely for emergencies. It's not much, but it can help you give Sophia and Eddie a better education or start your own business when you feel ready." I didn't know what to do with that information. On one hand, I needed the money for the children's education, especially since Sophia had proven to be very intelligent and wanted to study medicine. On the other hand, I didn't want anything that came from Thomas, because it could bring legal or moral problems. In the end, I decided to consult a lawyer. I explained the whole situation. I showed him Thomas's letter, and he investigated the bank account. After several months of verification, the lawyer confirmed that the money was legal, that it had been properly declared to the Swiss authorities, and that there was no impediment for me to use it. I know what you're thinking. Clean money from a drug lord? How convenient. And believe me, I thought the very same thing, but I've come to believe that maybe, just maybe, it was Thomas's one true act of love, a calculated plan from a man who knew how to cover his tracks, ensuring the family he was destroying would at least have a chance to rebuild. It wasn't a gift of love, it was a tool for survival, and I was going to use it. It was a considerable amount, $200,000. With that money, I was able to buy a small but nice house in a safe neighborhood. I was able to fully pay for Sophia's university studies and start my own accounting services business for the American community in Sault Ste. Marie. My business grew very well because there were many American families who needed help with their taxes, their immigration procedures, their legal documents. I understood their needs perfectly because I had been through the same experiences. In the 5th year of being in Canada, when I was legally allowed to return to the United States, I made a very difficult decision. I decided not to go back. Many people might not understand this decision. America was my homeland. But after all those years, I realized that home isn't the soil where you were born. Home is where you feel safe, where your children can grow in peace, where you build a life of meaning with your own 2 hands. Canada had given me all of that. And with that, the transformation is complete. Sarah's journey wasn't just about escaping a country. It was about finding a home within herself. America was the place she was born, but Canada became the place she was reborn, on her own terms. It's a powerful reminder that home is not a place you're from, but a place you build. Not yet, at least. Sophia was in her last year of high school. She was an excellent student and had been accepted into several prestigious universities to study medicine. Eddie was in middle school, had many friends, played football, and considered himself completely Canadian. My life in Sault Ste. Marie was stable, prosperous, and peaceful. I had my business, my house, a community that respected me, and true friends who knew nothing about my past but liked me for the person I was now. Why go back to the United States to face uncomfortable questions, curious glances, and possible problems with people who had known Thomas? Why disturb the peace that had cost me so much to build? Instead of going back, I invited my parents to visit us in Canada. It was very exciting to get them tourist visas and receive them at the Toronto airport after more than 5 years without seeing them. My dad had aged a lot. He had more gray hair and more wrinkles, but he still had the same kind smile. My mom cried for an hour when she saw me, and then cried for another hour when she met her Canadianized grandchildren. "Daughter," my mom said one night as we were chatting in the kitchen, "it's clear you've suffered a lot, but it's also clear you've grown a lot. You're no longer the naive girl who married Thomas. Now you're a businesswoman, a very strong mom, a person who knows what she wants." "Do you miss the United States?" my dad asked me. "Every day," I answered honestly. "But I no longer miss the life I had there. I miss the food, the climate, the music, the traditions. But I don't miss the insecurity, the uncertainty, the fear." My parents stayed with us for 3 months, and in that time, they were able to really get to know their Canadian grandchildren. Sophia taught them English, Eddie taught them how to play video games, and they both learned how to make tamales and mole the traditional way my mom taught them. When my parents returned to the United States, I had made another important decision. I decided to tell my children the whole truth about Thomas. Sophia was already 17, and Eddie was 15. They were old enough to understand complex situations. I sat them down one night after dinner and explained exactly what had happened. I told them about the documents I had found, about Thomas's arrest, about why we had to flee, about why they couldn't go back to the United States for all those years. Sophia was very quiet throughout my explanation, but in the end, she said, "Mom, I always knew something very serious had happened. I never believed that Dad just had work problems. It makes me very sad to know he was a criminal, but it makes me very proud to know you had the courage to save us." Eddie reacted differently. He got very angry. Not so much with Thomas, but with me. "Why didn't you tell me before?" he demanded. "Why did you lie to me all these years?" His anger was the thing that hurt the most, but I understood it. To him, I had taken away the image of his father. As a mother, you want to shield your children from all pain, but sometimes that very shielding causes a different kind of hurt. I had to accept his anger and give him time, because the truth, as painful as it is always better than living a lie. But after a few days of being upset, he came to apologize. "I understand you wanted to protect me," he said, "and I understand you did the best you could in a very difficult situation." In the 8th year of living in Canada, I received another unexpected piece of news. Thomas had died in prison, as Inspector Mitchell informed me by phone. He had been murdered by other inmates connected to rival cartels. "It was quick," the inspector told me. "He didn't suffer, and before he died, he asked me to tell you that he had thought of you and the children every day, that he had prayed for you to be happy." The news affected me more than I expected. Although Thomas had lied to me and deceived me for years, although he had endangered our children, he had also been the man I loved for almost a decade, the father of my children, my partner during the most important years of my youth. I mourned his death, but I did not mourn the life we had lost, because I had already accepted that that life had been an illusion from the beginning. Sophia and Eddie were also saddened by the news. Although they hadn't seen their father since they were very young, they still had fond memories of him, memories of when he played with them, when he read them stories, when he took them for walks. "At least he's not suffering in prison anymore," Sophia said with a maturity that surprised me. "And at least we were able to have a good life thanks to the decision you made, Mom." With Thomas's death, that chapter of my life was definitively closed. I was no longer the widow of a drug trafficker. I was no longer a fugitive. I no longer had to hide from my past. I was simply Sarah Davis, a Canadian-American businesswoman who had built a prosperous and honest life in Canada. Now I am 70 years old. Sophia graduated from medical school with honors and works at a hospital in Chicago. Eddie studied engineering and works for a tech company in Ann Arbor. They are both married to wonderful people. They both have beautiful children who call me Grandma in English and Spanish. My accounting business grew so much that I now have 5 employees and clients in 3 provinces. I bought a small building where I have my offices, and I also bought a bigger house with a garden where I can host my whole family. My parents came to live with me 2 years ago when they got sick and could no longer live alone in the United States. Now I have the joy of taking care of them as they took care of me, and they have the joy of spending their last years getting to know their great-grandchildren. Here I am now, 36 years after making the most difficult decision of my life, telling you this story. And you know what? I don't regret anything. Well, I regret being so naive for so many years, for not asking questions when I should have, for living in a bubble of comfort without wanting to see reality. But I don't regret fleeing. I don't regret protecting my children. I don't regret starting a new life at 34, when many women think it's too late to change. Because look at everything I've achieved. I raised 2 wonderful children who are successful professionals, who have beautiful families, who contribute positively to society. I built a prosperous business with my own effort. I helped hundreds of American families with their legal and financial paperwork. I became an independent, strong, respected woman in my community. Do I miss the United States? Of course I do. I miss the smells, the colors, the traditions, the way people are. But the United States is no longer my home in the same way as before. My home now is my children, my grandchildren, my work, my community in Sault Ste. Marie. Do I miss Thomas? I miss the man I thought he was. But that man never really existed. The real Thomas was a criminal who lied to me for 8 years, who endangered our children, who built our life on false and dangerous foundations. What I am most proud of in this whole story is discovering that I had an inner strength I never knew I had during my youth. I was always the obedient girl, the submissive wife, the woman who depended on others to make important decisions. But when the crucial moment came, when I had to choose between comfort and the safety of my children, I knew exactly what to do. I planned my escape like a military strategist. I gathered evidence like a professional detective. I executed my plan with the precision of a businesswoman, and then I rebuilt my life from scratch with the determination of a survivor. Now, when I see young women who are going through difficult situations, I always tell them the same thing. It's never too late to change your life. It's never too late to make brave decisions. It's never too late to protect the people you love, even if it means sacrificing your own comfort. Because look, I changed my identity at 34. I learned a new language, a new culture, a new legal system. I started a new business, built a new social network, created a new reputation. And I did all that as a middle-aged woman with 2 small children, without knowing anyone, without having enough money at first. If I could do it, any woman can do it. It doesn't matter if you're 50, 60, 80 years old. It doesn't matter if you don't have a university degree. It doesn't matter if you don't speak English perfectly. It doesn't matter if you don't have contacts or influence. The only thing that matters is having the will to change and the determination not to give up. Over all these years, I have received hundreds of calls, letters, and visits from women who have heard my story and ask for my advice. Women who are married to abusive men. Women who suspect their husbands are involved in illegal activities. Women who want to protect their children but don't know how. And I always tell them the same thing. Trust your gut. If something tells you that your family is in danger, your gut is probably right. Don't wait until you have all the evidence. Don't wait for the situation to get worse. Don't wait for someone else to make the decision for you. Plan carefully, but act quickly when the time comes. Seek legal help if necessary. Document everything you can. Prepare your escape without anyone noticing. And when the time comes to execute your plan, do it without looking back. I also tell them, don't be afraid to start from scratch. Yes, it will be difficult. Yes, you will have to make sacrifices. Yes, you will miss some things from your previous life, but freedom and security are priceless. The peace of mind of knowing your children are safe is priceless. And don't let anyone make you feel guilty for making difficult decisions. There will be people who will judge you, who will say you abandoned your husband in a difficult time, that you separated the children from their father, that you are a bad woman for not having endured the difficulties of marriage. Don't listen to them. Only you know what you lived through. Only you know the dangers you faced. Only you have the responsibility to protect your children. And only you have the right to decide what kind of life you want to live. One of the questions I've been asked the most over the years is if I've ever considered forgiving Thomas. If I ever thought about visiting him in prison when he was alive, if I regret cooperating with the police to arrest him, and my answer is always the same. I forgave Thomas for my own peace of mind, not for him. I forgave the man who lied to me, who deceived me, who endangered our children. But forgiving does not mean forgetting. Forgiving does not mean that what he did was right. Forgiving does not mean that I had to stay with him and accept the consequences of his crimes. Forgiving simply means that I stopped carrying the resentment, that I stopped allowing his betrayal to control my emotions, that I freed myself from hatred so I could concentrate on building a new life. As for cooperating with the police, I have never regretted that decision. Thomas was a criminal. His activities harmed many people, destroyed families, contributed to violence and corruption in our country. I had the opportunity to help stop him, and I did it, not out of revenge, but out of social responsibility. My children, now that they are adults, completely understand the decisions I made. Sophia has told me several times that she wants to write a book about our story to inspire other women who are going through similar situations. Eddie has told me that he is proud to have such a brave mom, that he admires me for having had the courage to start from scratch. My grandchildren, who were born in Canada, are growing up hearing stories about their grandmother who changed countries, who learned a new language, who built a successful business. To them, I am an example of what can be achieved with hard work and determination. They don't know all the details of why we had to leave the United States, but they do know that their grandmother is a very strong woman. And now, at 70, I'm still making plans for the future. I want to expand my business to more cities. I want to write a self-help book for women in difficult situations. I want to establish a foundation that helps American families settle legally in Canada, Because life doesn't end at 70. Life doesn't end when your children are adults. Life doesn't end when you have a certain financial security. There are always new projects, new dreams, new ways to contribute to the world. And I want to say something very important to all the women who are listening to me, especially those who are already over 50. Never let anyone tell you it's too late to change. Never let anyone tell you that you no longer have time to pursue your dreams. Never let anyone tell you that you have to settle for a life that doesn't make you happy. I started my new life at 34, and they have been the best 36 years of my life. They have been years of growth, of discovery, of achievements, of personal satisfaction. They have been years where I could be authentic, where I could make my own decisions, where I could live without fear. Yes, I miss some things from my old life. I miss the innocence, the sense of security I had when I believed Thomas was an honest man. I miss the financial comfort I had without having to work. I miss the youth, the energy, the feeling that anything was possible. But I wouldn't trade a single day of this new life to go back to the old one, because this life is real, it's honest, it's mine. I built this life with my own effort, with my own decisions, with my own mistakes and successes. This life has meaning, it has purpose, it has dignity, and that, my dears, is priceless. There was a time I thought the shards of that castle of lies would forever be embedded in my heart. But now, as I sit in the garden I planted with my own hands, hearing my grandchildren's laughter ring out, I only feel peace. The old scars haven't disappeared. They just remind me of the strength hidden within me, of the journey from darkness into light. This is my true story, a testament that no matter how fierce the storm, a person can always find the sunshine again. If this story touched you, please subscribe to the channel to listen and share together, because every one of us deserves a happy ending.